Welcome to a free-for-all Friday of the Old North State Sports Show. Folks, today we got a very special episode. We've been talking about calling into the show. I've got some calls from fans. We're going to play it. We're going to answer their questions and get into it. But before we do that, we got some coaching changes and updates to talk through. I'll highlight all those for you so that you're prepared and understand and know who's who, what's what, who's still here in Carolina. But the staff for the 2025 season is complete per Panthers.com. We expected we were getting pretty close considering the signings that had happened along the way. Unfortunately, it sounds like the assistant offensive line coach that we had here did a fantastic job, is going down to Jacksonville. Good for him, though. Probably getting a promotion, a raise, different title, more responsibility. Either way, I appreciate all his help here in Carolina getting this offensive line up to speed and on par. Actually, is one of the best in the league. But folks, let's go ahead and jump into this free-for-all Friday. So let's give you a very short summary of the hirings. I've talked about all of these along the way. The team hired former Bills associate athletic trainer Denny Kellington as the new VP of Player Health and Performance. They hired former Viking strength and conditioning coach John Hinkst as their new director of performance. They added Ronaldo Hill as a secondary coach, AC Carter as an outside linebackers coach, Keyshawn Coleman is offensive assistant, and Kevin Peterson as a defensive assistant. Mike Verkovikai is now an assistant quarterbacks coach and pass game specialist, and Mayor Chayadori is now an assistant linebackers coach. Those are all your changes. 2025 staff is complete. We'll spend a little more time gearing up in the season to talk about the changes in the staff, but overall, a lot of overhauling on the defensive side of the ball. Not much change on the offense. Now, just to reset, because it's been a while, of course, Dave Canales, head coach. Brad Idzik, still your offensive coordinator. Maybe there's a change, and eventually Idzik calls plays. We'll see. Harold Gooden is your assistant head coach, run game coordinator. Joe Gilbert is your offensive line coach. Remember, I talked about the assistant that left. Will Harriger, quarterback still. Pat McPherson, tight ends. Rob Moore, wide receivers. Bernie Parmalee, running backs. And then Mike Berkovikai, as we mentioned, assistant quarterbacks, pass game specialist, assistant. On the defensive side of the ball, quite a few changes. Not at the top, though. Ejiro Evero, defensive coordinator. Dom Capers, senior defensive assistant. Should mention that Caldwell is also a senior assistant, more on the offensive side. But AC Carter, outside linebackers, we talked about it. Jonathan Cooley, defensive pass game coordinator. Like Jonathan Cooley, follows me on X. So I appreciate it. Peter Hansen, linebackers. Ronaldo Hill, secondary coach. Todd Wash, I think it's supposed to be Wash, nowhere copied over, defensive line. And Mayor Chayadori, like we said, assistant linebackers. One of the groups that I wish changed, at least for the primary special teams coordinator, is Tracy Smith, but he's still here. I just give you a hard time, Tracy. Darren Bates, special teams assistant. Jim Caldwell, senior coaching advisor, like we mentioned. And then Scott Cooper, director of coaching development. He was here already. George Lee, same thing, gang management coordinator. Jessica Beckenstein, head coach assistant and coach operations. Keyshawn Coleman, offensive assistant. Alir Imani, coaching assistant. Kevin Peterson, defensive assistant. Dean Petzink, offensive quality control coach. And quite a list there, but that is all the changes. But folks, if you've been waiting for this moment, at least I have. I love when you guys engage with the show, leave your comments. But now we're taking it to another level. You can call the show and leave me a message. I do listen to them. I do ask, hopefully, that you're nice and kind. Try not to cuss. Just makes it a little easier for me on editing. If you want to say your name, where you're from, put it in there. I'll play it. I'll give you a shout out. If you want to go by an alias like I do, go for it. But just call the show, 910-679-6927. Open all the time. You'll get a message that I'm unavailable. That's the voicemail. It's a generic voicemail. I am going to change that, provide a little more clarity and explanation. But just know you call it, you leave a message, it goes. I get it. And then we get to do fun things like this. So we're going to get into our very first call on the show. This is groundbreaking for me personally. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I don't know this gentleman's name. If you want to leave a comment, I'd appreciate it. I'll give you an official shout out, but let's go ahead and get into it. And we will play the clip while I also show you what we have here. So let's do it.
I know we need defense, but if wide receiver Tech McMillan is there at number 8, we should go ahead and take him anyway. I know we need defense, but you can't pass on another Randy Moss lookalike.
There you go, folks. So I'm going to say it again just in case you had difficulty hearing that. It says, I know we need defense, but if wide receiver Tet McMillan is there at number 8, we should go ahead and take him. I know we need defense, but you can't pass on another Randy Moss lookalike. And here we go, folks. I personally, when I look at Tet McMillan's game, I don't know if he's a Randy Moss lookalike for me, but I will say I do think he's the best wide receiver in the draft. I like the size of Tet McMillan, and I do agree that if he is available, and I actually posted a clip of, not a clip, but a post of this earlier of a mock draft that I saw, if there's a situation where Ted is gone and a bunch of these other guys, Mason Graham, we know Abdul Carter, whoever, at pick number 8, there's a good chance the Panthers should trade back. I know Burden may come into the mix, but Ted McMillan is a very good wide receiver. I don't know, again, that I can put him in a Randy Moss category just yet. It feels like overall this is a weaker first-round draft class, but a pretty deep draft class when it comes to wide receivers. I just don't know that the top-end talent is there compared to some of the past years, but we'll find out. And I do think Panthers are going to, we'll talk about this actually as a final closing question that we get. I do think the Panthers should consider wide receiver. As much as we talk about defense, I think defense, a lot of it can be addressed through free agency. Depending on the spend, you're not going to find many good number 1 wide receivers available, not in free agency and likely not via trade as well. Guess what? Someone asked about that. So that'll also be coming up here in just a minute. But now we'll go to our second question here, which has to do with the draft. So let's run it.
I was wondering what your thoughts are on who's available to draft, who's realistically available, and who would be a dream pick to be able to pick.
Appreciate that. Again, no idea who that is. Thank you for calling in. Leave a comment. I'll be sure to shout you out. So again, if you missed it, he said, I was wondering what your thoughts are on who's available to draft. And I think maybe that's just a general, like, who do you think we can actually get? And then there's more of the realistic version, and we'll go through that. And then who's my dream pick? I mean, I can answer my dream pick without even getting into it. Abdul Carter. I don't think he's going to be there, but that is like the dream. People talk about like a draft prospect that you really like. That's the guy. I just don't think he's going to be available for the Panthers. But he did ask about draft picks and who do I think realistically will be there and who the Panthers are considering. So let's do it. We'll start with wide receiver. And why not? The wide receiver discussion continues. Tet McMillan to most. You look at the size here, 6'5", may measure at 6'4". Big wide receiver out of Arizona. Best prospect in the draft, although Luther Burden, who's a smaller 5'11", also pretty athletic and creeping up the boards on a lot of folks. I think those are your two. There's a slim chance that Emeka Egbuka, if the Panthers trade back, he could be available. But those are the 3 that I have in contention right now. Tight ends. I know some people may not, be in the realm of thinking about a tight end, but I do think Tyler Warren out of Penn State and Colston Loveland out of Michigan, who's also creeping up a lot of boards, is going to be another good prospect. And I know you don't really know. We got a month. Once we get through free agency, we will have a better idea of the needs and if the Panthers have the ability to go out and spend money on one of these positions that, you may think right now there's no way we could do that. It's just going to depend on how free agency plays out. This one's a little harder to see maybe for you guys, but we did try to pull in defensive backs, line. So Abdul Carter, again, I think the next realistic person that may be there is Mason Graham. I would not be displeased if we picked up Mason Graham. I've mocked James Pierce Jr., Mykal Williams, Kenneth Grant, Shamar Stewart. Like, throw those names in there. I think those guys are all in play. I also think on the defensive back side, Will Johnson, a cornerback, depending again if we bring back Mike Jackson, what that looks like. And then we kind of get into a few other guys, again, safety out of South Carolina, cornerback out of ECU is coming off of injury. And then my favorite, Malachi Starks. I also think very seriously the Panthers may consider this hybrid linebacker, Jalen Walker out of Georgia, and then Jihad Campbell, definitely the best overall actual linebacker. I think Walker's more of a hybrid between edge and outside. So all those guys, realistically, in my opinion, I think that whole group, if you're looking like who we're going to pick through or have available in the first round, and it could vary, if we trade back, I think all those guys come into play. So great question. Appreciate you asking. Again, folks, who follow me, I have plenty of mock drafts post free agency. I like to just get prospects out, learn about them, and do that in between. So we've got our final question of the day. And again, it stems from wide receiver. So we're going to run the tape here. We'll get it fixed for you.
Hey, buddy, I just want you to know I do watch your show and I do love it. My name's Miles Bishop. I'm from Illinois. I'm a diehard Carolina Panthers fan. But what is your take on our number one receiver? We need one dire. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Miles. I greatly appreciate you tuning in. Tuning in from Chicago too, man. Bears country. Hey, man, much appreciated for you following the show. And yeah, folks, if you shout out where you're from, like it's cool to hear where people are tuning into this show. Those who didn't hear it, again, I'll transcribe. Hey, buddy, just wanted you to know, watch your show, love it. His name's Miles. He's from Illinois, diehard Panthers fan. And the short question that we want to get into is, what is your take on our number one wide receiver? We need one. Yeah, we've been talking about number one wide receiver, and in just a second, I'm going to tell you why it feels like to me the Panthers are either going to have to trade, and the pickings are slim. Pun intended, some folks have pointed out George Pickens available, possibly DK Metcalf or Deebo Samuel. I don't know that Garrett Wilson's available. T. Higgins likely going back to Cincinnati, getting the franchise tag. So you throw all those things in the mix, and it's a very weak class trying to figure out number one. And let's look at this graphic here. These are the best available free agent wide receivers according to Fox. And I kind of agree with the rankings. T. Higgins, maybe not Chris Godwin at 2, but it just shows you how weak it is. T. Higgins going back to Cincinnati. Chris Godwin going back to Tampa. That's in the process right now. Stephon Diggs, injury, older. I don't know that I want him. Amari Cooper, same thing. You kind of pass on him. DeAndre Hopkins, we saw who he was late in the year. Like, this is how weak the class is. Then you have Keenan Allen, who is a shell of himself. But, man, I can't say much because I played him in high school. I didn't personally because I was hurt and I tore my ACL, but I saw him play, and we played him, and he kicked our butts. Dude's fantastic out of Northern Guilford High School. Fantastic, like seriously, but I can't say too much about being a shell because I'm the same age as him. Marquise Brown, Darius Slayton, Kavontae Turpin, De'Ami Brown. I do like De'Ami Brown, but I think your number one selection it's not there. There's not a lot of guys to pick at number one that could just come in and impact it. That's why it seems to me, if I'm the Panthers, they're possibly going to lean in drafting a wide receiver in the first round. I know they just drafted Xavier Legette, but that is my lean unless they can figure out a trade without having to give up a lot of assets. So we'll close it out. I had one more. Ryan from Leland, who's right here where I live. He shouted out he wants to talk about NFL draft, so I'm going to connect with him. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that I got his voicemail. You folks can participate in this show. I mean, eventually we may have too many calls for me to manage, but for now, 910-679-6927, bam, call it, leave a message. It's appreciated, helps me with this show. We're close to 2,000 subscribers. The podcast itself, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of doing this thing. I like the grassroots effort to continue to grow. And I mean, my goal is to take this thing as far as we can take it. And we're only at the beginning. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in, subscribe, sub, follow, all that. Let people know to listen and tune in. As always, this is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.